Thank you for watching. Before me you see my Axial Yeti XL kit. I've been having a blast with this car in the past couple of weeks. Now, this is not going to be a review video because I think this car is awesome. Did everything go right? You know, did I break anything? Of course I broke a few things. That's my driving style, and it is me just really seeing how far I can push this car. I'm really excited to have a car in this scale. I mean, Axial advertises this as an 8 scale, and I've said this before, but this is not an 8 scale, this is a 6 scale. I'm really excited to have a car in this scale with a solid rear axle and the independent front suspension. Did I run into any issues with this axle? Yes, I did. I stripped a few gears, nothing that a bit of different shimming and a bit of different bearings cannot solve. And I completely grenaded the rear shock tower. That is also an easy fix. Just put in some longer screws from the bottom instead of the 20mm. I went for a 30, problem solved. Apart from that, I wasn't able to break anything on this car. It did, however, make me look at it, and I wondered a whole lot, because what I found really intriguing is the fact that this car is almost a completely parallel setup, meaning that the roof width is exactly the same in the front as it is in the rear, and the same goes for the sides of the roll cage. There's no difference in width from the point that you see over here to the point that you see over here. That makes for a really interesting bunch of ingredients to do some customization. So what have I planned for this car? I basically want to split it up. Not this one, I want to split up two brand new kits. I know that sounds a tiny bit crazy, but I'm fairly confident that I will be able to pull this off. If you split the car up right over here, you end up with a usable front section that has 2 passengers inside. That would also have the full front suspension setup, etc, etc. And if you would split up a second car over here, you would have the complete rear setup with the trail suspension, the solid rear axle, the spare wheel, and 2 passengers that sit in the back. So you would have a 4-seater Yeti XL instead of a 2-seater. Apart from just the looks and having a 4-seater Yeti XL instead of a 2-seater, I think that really cool stuff happens on the chassis, because you will be able to put in an extra transmission case, and you also will be able to put in an extra motor and ESC setup. What does that mean? That means that you get 1 motor and ESC powering just the front drivetrain, and you would have 1 motor and ESC just powering the rear drivetrain. Now on paper that also means that you could set up a dig system, meaning that you just drive the fronts or you just drive the rears. So I think that that whole idea has a lot of potential, and well, in the past week I've been busy to execute it. I will just toss this car to the side and I will show you what I got so far. I will also go over some of the alterations that I made, because you do have a bunch of ingredients if you have 2 kits available that you can work with, not just for splitting it up and making sure that you can put those 2 chassis together afterwards, but also to get the suspension tuned correctly and to solve some of those issues, like for example I had with the gearing in the inside of the rear axle. Now, let's have a look at the rear first. Quite a lot of stuff happening over here. You can see that I went for the optional top link stiffeners that Axial has on their product lineup. I just think that not only would they sort of take some of the slop out, they also look really cool. They complement the aluminium braces that you get for the lower trailing arms, and well, they add a tiny bit of rigidity, so I think that's cool. Another thing that I did is I did use all the shocks or I used all the rear shocks that I found in both kits. So I put an extra set of shock absorbers right over here in the back. Now, no modifications were needed in order to make that happen. I do have all the resis on there as well. I may need to alter that a tiny bit or fine tune it. I'm not completely sure yet, but as of now this was a direct fit. The holes in the bottom, so in the lower trailing arm, they're the stock holes that I used. The ones in the top, same story. So this is not rocket science at all. These shocks, they are set up with the stock weight oil. I did go for 4-hole pistons, one 4 in the rear and 1 3 in the front, just because the rear would have a tiny bit more travel, or would travel a tiny bit longer or further than the front ones. Apart from that, nothing truly spectacular going on over here. I plan to modify the top of that fuel cell so I can fit my additional ESC right over here in the top. I do of course want to be able to use that cooling fin, or I want to make sure that it gets enough fresh air. So that's why I'll be cutting out the top of that lid. This is not anything that's going to show eventually, because you're going to cover this up with the cage, and after that the spare wheel. You can see that the motor setup that I went with is the exact same as I used in my, I'm pointing over there, you cannot see it, in my shorter Yeti XL. So this is a Mamba Monster 2 ESC and the 2200 kilovolt motor by Castle Creations. I've been having a ton of fun with that motor. It's madly overpowered, but that's exactly my intention in this car as well. I want it to be completely obscene, and I want it to be completely over the top and bonkers. So inputting one motor in the front like this and one motor in the rear like you see over here, I think I should be able to pull that off. I will put the wheels back on this part of the car, and then I will show you what is happening in the front. Oh, again, these 4 screws that you see over here in the bottom, one hidden over here, one hidden over there. Replace those. Don't use those 20mm screws. Go for the 30mm version. And especially right now with the double shock setup, that rear will be a whole lot stiffer than it is intended to be. So you will be adding a whole lot more force to this part of the cage. This is also where your body is going to hook up. So yeah, make sure to swap those out. It's a really easy modification, and it will avoid a lot of problems. I would not be surprised, by the way, if those screws get swapped out for longer versions in all production versions at some point, because I cannot imagine that I'm the only one who has some issues with that. How I did the cut over here in the front, I will address that a tiny bit later, because that's not one of the first steps that you will do. It's actually one of the very last ones. Onto the front. In the front as well. In the front I used some thicker shock oil, just because I could not fit an additional shock absorber over here without it looking completely ghetto or completely ugly. So I went for some thicker shock oil. These shocks, they perform excellent, by the way. So in just tuning it a tiny bit with the oil and a bit of a different piston, I'm fairly confident that it will perform the way that I hope. If not, it's an easy tune-up and it's an easy fix. I'm not completely sure yet what type of servo I'm going to run in here, but it does need to be something with a lot of hold power and a whole lot of torque. And I'm pretty sure that I will find something. I'm pretty happy with the high-tech servo that I'm running in my shorter Yeti XL. So chances are that I will be going for the exact same one. From the top of my head, it's a high-tech 7954 something, but I will make sure to put a link in the description box. Over here, again, you see it's sort of like a mimic of the back. You see the Mamba Monster 2 ESC and motor setup. Of course, again, a 2200 kV motor, because I want them to be completely matched. And again, you see a weird cut going on, which I will explain later on. I will now take you to one of the most labor-intensive parts of doing a build like this, which is the cage and the body. Now, I think this turned out pretty cool, or I'm really pleased with the way that it turned out. This was not that difficult to do at all. There's a part that you see over here. That's also why I haven't painted up the body yet. There's a part you see going on over here which is tapered in a tiny bit. I decided to leave that on in the front half of the cage just to give me an opportunity to bolt through the rear part of the cage into the front part of the cage. So that's split number one. Another thing that I did was I sort of made the fishtail on the top section of the cage. So I made sure that I could fit half of one cage and half of the other cage over each other, bolting it through into the roll cage part that you get for the top. A lot of work was taking off this part that you see right here in the back of the cage, taking that off that front section. That's basically a few, well, I won't say hours, but it's a lot of work to make sure that it's completely fine-tuned and that it looks right. This is molded into that one tube that you see. So what I did is I hacked it off with a Dremel first, afterwards I shaved it with a scalpel, and afterwards I fine sanded it. A really useful tool for modifications like these and also for modifications on the chassis is this Protoform sanding block. I know that it is intended for just legs and bodies. It is a great tool if you want to do like a complete hack job like this one. I wanted to have as many points as possible to fix those two cages together. Not that this is the eventual solution, because I will be adding something more that I will explain later, but I wanted to have a few connection points. So one of them is this screw on the top, which bolts through both the front and the rear half of the cage. Another one is that bolt that I explained that goes in from the side. Then there is another bolt, I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's another bolt going on through the front of the cage into the rear over here. And then eventually, last but not least, there's a bolt going on into the front cage through the rear cage, right in that split in the bottom over here. Now all of this is, again, guesswork. There's no manual for this. It is just have a look at it, see how you think that you can solve this in the best possible fashion, and just go with your gut feeling on where to cut and where to make some new holes and where to put in some new screws. As you can tell, I was also able to put in those additional passengers. One of them is still holding a steering wheel. That will be addressed as well, because I'm going to put in like a blind panel which would then cover up that steering wheel, make sure that you cannot see it. And hacking up these body panels is no problem at all. Just score them and snap them, and then put them together and see how you would like the body to line up and how you would like it to look. Again, no manual, just go with your gut feeling and be creative. Make sure that this is the very first part that you cut, because the overall length of your cage will dictate what you need to do for the chassis. So this is also the very first part that I modified in this build. After doing this, you can determine what the length is going to be from this pivot point in the back. You may be familiar with that. That's where you sort of lift up the body. So from this pivot point in the back to these two body pin holes in the front, that length is going to be the exact length of your newly hacked up and put together chassis. So do this first, afterwards go hack up your chassis, not the other way around. That does not work. I will quickly get this out of the way and put this car stand over here. There's no car stand that's long enough to accommodate a project like this, so I needed to improvise a tiny bit, hence the two blocks of wood. I will now put the front part of the chassis and the rear part of the chassis together. You can see that not only that I need to hack up the chassis, I also needed to hack up the battery trays. Think not twice, but think like 5 times before you go ahead and actually make your cuts, just to make sure that you get most out of it. So one of the most crucial parts is you want to have these 4 pins that hold the battery trays closed, that close those lids. You want to be able to use all of those. So that's why I went for sort of like a zigzag type of cut. These battery tray lids, they were not on when I made the cuts. I cut those afterwards separately just to see where the easiest place would be to hack them up. And if you're done doing all that and after you sand it up, you would end up with something that looks more or less like this. You can see that nothing is interfering with the mounting points of the front transmission and motor and ESC, and nothing is interfering with the mounting points of the transmission, the motor and the ESC in the back. That is something that is pretty much important. If I ever choose to do so, I would be able to marry the front and rear transmission and put them together with another axle. But for now, I'm going to run it as it is and just see what it can do. Now, when mocking all of this stuff up, the easiest way to do it is to just use the hinge pins. So you can push those in, make sure that everything lines up, see if you need to do some additional sanding or grinding or even hacksawing before you're done, and can consider it so far so good. Now there's a ton of possible ways to fuse these two chassis halves together. My way is going to be, I'm going to use a plate of 1/4 inch or 6mm Delrin, which is going to be machined. How I'm going to do that, you will see that in probably the next video or in a few videos. For now, I just wanted to show you the progress. So far, I think it is turning out to be pretty awesome, pretty different, and pretty unique. A unique axial vehicle, a Yeti XXL, a 4-seater. I think it's pretty cool. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button. If you have any questions, I'm sure you will have a ton. And I will see if I can answer them. Ask them in the comments box below. Any random comments, leave them there as well. If you want to follow along with this build, I have a thread up on RC Crawler, and I have a thread up on the Scale Builders Guild, which well, they contain a lot of info, because I'm pretty sure that I forgot to tell you a thing or two over here in this video. And if you want to be a tiny bit ahead of what I'm doing over here on YouTube, make sure to check out my Facebook page. There's a link in the description box, or my Instagram, because every time I'm doing something new to this truck, you will see it over there. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you around. Thanks, bye bye.